presented by The Hockey Shop, source for sports story. This is InGoal Radio, the podcast. I'm Darren Millard, along with the co-founders of InGoal Magazine, David Hutchison and Kevin Woodley. Today, you will hear from newly crowned Vezina Trophy winner Connor Hellebuyck, a conversation between Woodley and the Winnipeg Jets goaltender that took place just after Hellebuyck learned that he was the National Hockey League's top goaltender for 2019-2020. We'll also check out what Cam is up to over at the Hockey Shop, source for sports story, and we'll look at the Bauer ultrasonic pad this week on the gear segment. But out of the gate, gentlemen, we are into the Stanley Cup final, and after all that we've watched from the free agent side of things as we near a free agency on October 9th and the goaltenders that are going to be up for grabs, Woody, Anton Khudobin is the last free agent or soon-to-be free agent standing. What has this run done for the Russian netminder on the open market in 2 weeks' time?
Honestly, we're going to have to wait for 2 weeks' time to find out because it's just like it's nuts out there. There's so much speculation. I'm hearing a lot of, we've said even before COVID, this was going to be a buyer's market for goaltenders. And what you hear from a lot of the agents is they think that this market's going to be really depressed for goaltending in particular. So after all these years of waiting for the opportunity to show he can be a number one goaltender, he's entering the free agent market as a number one goaltender at maybe the wrong time. In terms of perception of Anton Khudobin, I mean, I think that he was already a lot of teams' perfect 1B. And I've said this, I said this a couple of years ago when they signed him in Dallas. He was perfect for them because he's a guy who has learned how to give you good starts when he's playing once every 2 weeks. But he's also a guy that can give you great starts for 2 straight weeks and arguably gets better if you need him for 2 straight weeks or 2 straight months. And that was perfect for Dallas with Ben Bishop because as good as Bishop has been, injuries are a part of his track record in recent years. So still think he's a perfect fit there. I know his preference has always been to stay there, but you wonder, they weren't able to get that deal done before the playoffs, and you wonder what that might look like in terms of the price going up and more teams maybe on the outside now looking at Anton Khudobin and saying, well, this guy isn't just a perfect 1B, but he might be a 1A. At the end of the day, we're into job shares no matter what. Everything you're seeing in the playoffs right now is going to be amplified next season. As much as we don't know what next season looks like, most people I talk to are certain it's going to be condensed, and that means you're going to need to. So whether he is still a 1B in some minds or he is the ultimate 1A, he's going to be a guy who will be in demand, and yet we don't know what that means because we don't know what the market looks like. I think Jacob Markstrom sets the market. I think Jacob Markstrom is the prize on the market. And there are a lot of other agents, goalies, and GMs that will have to sort of quickly sort out the dominoes once his falls.
When the next season starts, if Anton Khudobin remains with the Dallas Stars, Hutch, who should be the number one goaltender?
And maybe it depends on how the next 3 or 4 games go as well, doesn't it, Darren? I think you're going to see an equal split at the beginning if he remains with the team. And they'll probably let things go because, as Woody said, things are going to be compressed next year. No matter what, the season will be starting late. And although they talk about things being able to run fairly late into the summer next year, we've got the Olympics to contend with as well, potentially. So I think there's going to be a desire to get things done a little bit quicker, and there's a desire to get as many games in as possible. So compressed schedule, I think if they end up together, you'll probably see a split, and we'll see where things go from there. But I'm fascinated by this offseason, guys. Normally we talk about that musical chairs time in free agency, and you can probably see a pecking order. I mean, I'm sure Woody's right that Jacob Markstrom's the first domino to fall, but I think we might have seen in the past that most teams would have had a very similar list in terms of which order they want to go after guys. But now there's so many parameters involved that I think you're going to see, every team's got a different list in terms of what they can manage in terms of their cap, in terms of what player they're able to they're targeting to pair up in their sort of 1A, 1B scenario, unless you're one of those rare teams with a guy they're going to ride. And then I think actually players' priorities might be changing this offseason as well. And that's something I can't stop thinking about because, Woody, you're right. A guy like Doby probably wants to stay in Dallas, and he understands that it's a scenario that's been really good for him. And in some years, you might be willing to fall back on that. But is this a year that's taught everybody that you have to make a little money while you can, because you never really know what next year brings? The market's been depressed because of this, but don't forget, guys are going to lose a lot more to escrow next year as well. So it's sort of amplifying the depressed market. So I think different guys are going to have some different ways of looking at things, and it's going to be fascinating.
Well, one of those ways of looking at things is, I think some of the things I've heard is that guys are going to maybe want, and I know there are teams that are sort of counting on this, the devil you know. At a time when there is so much uncertainty in the world in terms of COVID and seasons and what things look like in different countries and what borders I can cross, and maybe even the potential for another bubble to start the season, which I don't think players want, obviously. Do I really want to make a decision that also adds more uncertainty? Do I fit in the system? Will I get along with everybody in the room? Is this defense going to help me the same way my last defense helped me? Am I going to get along with this goalie coach, or do I keep building with the guy I've known for the past couple of years? With so much uncertainty, can I cross the border? Can I take my family to the city that I sign with as easily as where I am right now? With so much uncertainty all over the place in terms of COVID and what it does to next season, I think adding guys are going to be hesitant to add even more questions to their lives by moving. And I think, like I said, I think there are a lot of teams that are right now playing chicken. They're not willing to go where maybe the agents think the market was before, and they're saying, go see what's out there, because they know the preference of the player is to stay where he is. And I think it's a risky proposition. Here in Vancouver, it's a risky proposition because Jacob Markstrom's the best fit. But it's one that more teams seem willing to take. And part of that equation is thinking that guys might not want to move and add any more uncertainty. Although, interestingly enough, in Jacob Markstrom's case, like, he doesn't have a family that he has to drag with him across the country or across a border or into a different setup. But I do think teams are counting on that a little bit. And we'll see. But I like Jaro Halak did in Boston, because he'd be on this list as one of the prime guys, especially in that 1B role. Decided that staying pat, even for just one extra year for $3.5 million, was just worth it compared to having to go through all the stuff we're talking about.
Is Anton Khudobin the player that would be least affected positively by this incredible run because of his age, because of COVID, because of where we are in the game and the glut on the market? Like, how much more money would he be making because of taking over the number one job compared to what he was offered previously, or what they were initially negotiating?
Well, see, Hudobin's already on I believe a pretty, I guess it's a middling ticket. To me, Anton Khudobin, the market for him was set by Jaro Halak, right? Jaro settles for 1 year at $3.5 million. Anton's on a 2-year deal worth $5 million, so $2.5 a year. So I think if you get him into the 3.5 range, that's where I had him before. That's
probably the max that he was going to get.
Yeah, that's kind of where I had that to me, that's where he was before. And if you're Dallas, you're looking at what you've got coming and how long do we want to commit to these two? Because are we putting a ceiling on somebody like a Jake Oettinger? When do we think he might be ready?
So that's sort of my point, was if after a good regular season, he was going to get 3. After a Stanley Cup run, maybe he gets another $500,000 because of the Stanley Cup. Like, when you look at it big picture, this performance isn't going to translate into huge money for him.
No, because we're hearing some of the top names are being offered 5. So if 5 sets the market, although there are, the agents would prefer that the top of the market is set around 6 and with term. But you're right. If Anton Khudobin was settled at, I had $3.5 million before, this run maybe moves him to a $4 million goaltender. Is that worth it to uproot your life? And I guess there's other factors, right? Like term. Can you get 3 years somewhere versus 2 from Dallas? Is Dallas even willing to do 2? What does the tax situation look like where you're being offered it compared to Dallas? Like, there's so much that goes into this. How settled are you in Dallas? Do you have a mortgage? Do you own your home? These things all matter. But at the end of the day,
I think the border, what you mentioned about the border, might be the most influential on a short term.
Absolutely. And the other thing, though, is like you said, I think you're absolutely right, Darren. Like, the difference isn't as big as it used to be. Like, Anton Khudobin is not getting a $5 million a year multi-year contract based on this run. Like it's going to, like I said, if it changes him from the best 1B option to maybe a 1A option, that's not a big difference in a depressed market. And that's why, I think we all know that Lehner seems to crave security based on the things he's said. And, so that would be what? That would be, if that's a 5-year deal for Robin and he's willing to accept 5, I think that sets the market because he's a top guy. There aren't very many teams looking for a number 1 goalie for the next 5 years that are going to pay like $6 million a year. It's a pretty short list. And to have a team sort of, if they do decide to go that route, usually it's on teams that are sort of rebuilding and in a tougher stage. And if you're Jacob Markstrom, for example, is that where you want to go? So there's a lot of different variables and a lot of teams that are sort of playing that game of chicken right now, and we'll see where it goes. But I think their willingness to play that game of chicken is based on 2 things. One, they just don't have the cap space to just say, hey, we want you, we need you, stay here. And 2, it's just a buyer's market, and all these factors make it even more so.
What about, what do you think about Craig Anderson talking about it being a buyer's market? Has he got another stop?
Well, Ottawa said today they weren't going to offer him a contract, and they've made him aware of that. And I think that that's not a surprise to anyone. I think you got to go with what Craig told. So I can't remember what report it was. I apologize because I like to cite the sources, but it was a couple months ago during the pause that he felt he had another year in him and that he wanted to keep playing. And so I think he would have made that statement knowing it was probably somewhere else. But, I had lunch with Craig when I was in Florida for that week I spent there with the Panthers and Robbie Tallis on the ice. And Craig was one of the guys that came to their shinny skate every day after the morning session. And, at the time he felt like that contract might be his last contract, the one in Ottawa that's expired, just because the family lives in Florida. Like he's away from his kids during the year. They stayed in Florida while he was in Ottawa. So I think as much as he wants to play, you add a pandemic to that situation. Outside of there being an opportunity in Florida, which I don't really see with how well Chris Driedger played and obviously the contract that Bob's under, or Tampa Bay, and I'm pretty sure McElhinney signed a 2-year deal to play with Vasilevsky, so he's got another year left on that. Like, I could be wrong, and I don't want to put words in his mouth because, like I said, he was on record this summer saying he still wanted to play. But I think for some of those guys, the situation isn't going to be one that makes sense now from a family perspective. Like, it already would have taken, I think, a pretty good situation for him to continue playing anyways. Moving isn't an option. Playing away, like it's just, maybe not. Like if he wants to play, I still think he can play. We've had it at InGoal. Like his reads are exceptional.
Well, Jimmy Howard's in the same boat too, right? He said that he still wants to play though.
Yeah, and Jimmy's coming off a down year. I still think there's something there too. I guess at the end of the day, and there are other guys that could be in this equation as well. Devin Dubnyk is being mentioned as a buyout candidate of Minnesota. So he could all of a sudden, if they do buy him out and that window opens this Friday, 2-week window between now and unrestricted free agency for buyouts, and Lundqvist and Dubnyk are on that list. If he does get bought out, does he want to keep playing? Of course he does. I believe when Craig Anderson says he wants to keep playing, and Jimmy Howard wants to keep playing. But in a buyer's market where quickly we see some of the seats that have been vacated are already being filled by younger goaltenders. St. Louis moves Jake Allen, but they just slide in Ville Husso. Like, are you, one thing to say you want to play, but are you willing to take a deal that isn't near what you're used to? Or is a situation with uncertainty, possibly the uncertainty of maybe having to clear waivers or be a number 3 guy or take a lower salary to stay in the NHL? That's a different question than I want to play. It's a bit different between do I want to play and do I have the hunger to play through a less than ideal circumstance. Those are 2 different things for guys who have been around a long time. And I don't want to say they've gotten comfortable, but they're just used to a certain status in the league that they might not be afforded by this unrestricted free agent market anymore.
No question about the number 1 seat in Winnipeg. And how about that contract that was signed a couple of years ago? And a 6-year deal for Connor Hellebuyck with the Winnipeg Jets at a AAV of just over $6 million. And now you're paying a 2-time Vezina finalist and a Vezina Trophy winner. And we have a conversation with Connor Hellebuyck talking about his Vezina Trophy announcement and his conversation with Grant Fuhr in just a couple of minutes as Kevin Woodley catches up with the Winnipeg Jet netminder.
Well, and one of the answers to that question about that contract, Aaron, you said just over 6. And of course, the reason it's just over 6 because he signed a contract for $37 million instead of $36 million. And why 37 million? Why the number 37? That gets answered in our interview with Connor Hellebuyck. So I think that's what you guys in the industry that actually know what you're doing call a tease.
Just a little bit of a carrot out in front of your nose. So why did he sign a deal for $37 million? It might have something to do with the number on his back, but where does that relate to? And how far back does that go? Well, we'll tell you all about that. And then there's a connection of wearing number 37 because he had to get permission from the Winnipeg Jets franchise and outside of the organization to wear that number. So a double tease, if you will, regarding Connor Hellebuyck. But our source for sports, the Hockey Shop, source for sports Surrey gear segment deals with the Bauer ultrasonic line, and don't want to waste and get too far off path because Cam is standing by. You guys are going to deal with the pad, and looking forward to this conversation between Woody and Cam in our InGoal Radio, the podcast gear segment, brought to you by the Hockey Shop, source for sports Surrey.
Welcome back to the Hockey Shop, source for sports here in beautiful Surrey, British Columbia, the outskirts of Vancouver, my local store. Our second week back here in goalie heaven, as I call it. It's the basement, an entire floor dedicated to goaltending with Cam Matwiv. Cam, second week back. We've had you back on the podcast. Title sponsor, gear segment is back, and I'm still jacked. And I think that you're going to be just as jacked after 2 weeks, because this week we're going to talk about the Bauer ultrasonic pad, and it sounds like this has been an absolute home run for you at retail so far.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. You can say it's ultra good.
Oh, man.
Anyone?
Really?
No?
Really? Like, you just brought my buzz down with that bad... Did you, out of curiosity, did you have a kid while we were away during the pandemic? Because that was like the dad joke of all dad jokes. My kids are cringing. And they're like 40 kilometers away right now. That's... Wow, I'm tempted to restart this, but let's just pretend you never made that joke and let's move forward. What is it? Now, we've obviously had it at ingoalmag.com. We've had it for a while. As a matter of fact, one of your employees who is playing Junior B had our test set out for a while and ordered a set of his own. I think several of your staff members have ordered sets of their own. What is it that's setting the ultrasonic apart? Is it just the Stabilis Slide knee, or is that the starting point and there's a whole bunch more?
Yeah, that's like the icing on the cake to what has become, a very, very strong and highly recommended option, especially through our guys, not only, custom ordering it for themselves, but just from experience, we've been getting feedback from our customers in particular, the amount of custom orders we've done so far. There's a lot of positives here, and they definitely need to have their shout out for sure.
Okay, so let's start with the Stabilis Slide knee, because that's where we started our review, because it's, as we said, I think, we're big on product innovation, development, technology changes. And this was a big one from the get-go. The concept that knee stack is going to be fixed to the face of the pad. And no, for all the people on Instagram that told us all knee stacks are fixed to the face of the pad. No, I mean like fixed at 90 degrees, doesn't budge, won't move, not gonna flop around on you over time. Fixed, part of the face of the pad. What is it about that you get such positive feedback on?
So it's all to do with that down butterfly position, and actually that drive down too, with an unfixed knee cradle. And by all means, this isn't a knock to any other company, for those that are listening. But when you have something that's solid, you're creating a much more stable platform to drive down to the ice, and then once it hits, you're sitting a lot taller and without that slip back that you see. Or when you don't have that there, sometimes that knee pad or knee cradle will buckle a little bit and actually start to become parallel with the pad, especially with the force that's being driven. Or when you're doing a quick overdrive slide, power push for lack of a better term, you'll see that buckle happen. Here, that doesn't happen. That pad stays secure and like solid right at that knee area. You're increasing your height of your butterfly. You're more stable. You can be more reactive. You're not worried about the pad, doing over rotating or doing something it shouldn't for example. So,
and it seals like a hot damn.
We didn't even get that far yet, but yes, and exact.
Okay, so there are other elements to that. So StabiliSlide knee, I feel like we've talked a lot about it a lot. You kind of just went over the key points there. I don't know that we need to dwell on it because I think everybody's already excited about it. But I think a lot of the times people miss the other elements in the leg channel that allow that connection and that seal and that performance to continue down on the ice and getting to the ice. And that's, to me, the removable calf pillow is another one. If you feel like you need a little more stability and you leave it in and it's there. Also, the sort of the way they've wedged that calf wedge and the angle they've created there so that sort of where your leg is what touches the ice, but by angling it up, there's a gap there. So in other words, it's not all flush on the ice, which makes it slide better.
That's correct. I mean, the pad itself will be flush, but where the actual calf plate's hitting the ice, there's a little bit of a raise there. So less surface area contact in the ice, easier slide, less friction.
Well, and of course, this is a pad that has already the reputation as being, I think it's fair to say that with the hard surface and the Cortex skin, the best sliding pad on the market.
A benchmark, if you will.
And that continues.
Exactly.
And that's always been the give and take. When you improve seal, you usually have more of the pad contacting the ice more firmly, and that's going to negatively affect sliding. I think everyone we've had test the pad, and the fact that some of them bought it quickly right away, has said sliding isn't negatively affected by the improved seal. That's a pretty good best of both worlds.
Exactly. And even rewinding back to what you're calling about some of those leg changes and things, like what really excites me here is that it shows a lot of Bauer's willingness to listen and improve upon their designs and whatnot, and what we're seeing and what's evolved into what is the ultrasonic backing, more in line with the Vapor, but also more in line with what they were getting in terms of pro requests coming at retail as well, and just general feedback over the pad. Not that there's anything wrong with Supreme strapping. It's on the wall. We have some for sale and whatnot, but for some guys, it could be quite confusing. We've now seen that Vapor strapping, which is quite a bit easier. You basically just got your one calf, the closure calf, and then your knee strap. Simplified. It's a better version of something that already was very good. And they brought it, they've listened, they put it onto their Supreme pad.
And what we liked about that, and we've talked about this, right? Back to the 2X line, is that there's an adjustability and customizability to fit and feel that comes with that strapping, depending on where you attach that Velcro tab and how you lengthen top or bottom of it, how tight you pull it. You can totally change the way this pad feels and performs and moves with or around your leg. And again, that's kind of a nice ability to have with just one single strap or simple strap.
Exactly. And 100% correct there. So one other feature that some of the guys have been quite excited about that we've seen been brought over to this pad has now been their control strap that they've added. We're talking about that professor strap, for lack of a better term.
I feel like we should call Ben Scrivens and see if he like needs royalties on that every time we say it.
The professor strap. I love it. Yeah, I know that. And I almost forgot about it, to be honest with you. That's a nice addition on this pad. What I think makes it a nice addition is you can take it on and off real easy. You don't have to commit to it full time. Try it. It's the perfect pad to try it on. If you don't like it, just take it off. I've seen some guys where they like the connection at the top of the calf from that professor strap. And they take their knee. They don't feel like they need a strap off the knee cradle. Mm-hmm. Other guys feel like the knee cradle's enough and they don't want the professor strap. Again, options, and real simple to go back and forth from one to the other. You don't have to commit when you purchase it and be stuck with it forever. And that's the thing. Like stock off the wall, these are fantastic if it fits your bread and butter there. But that said, if you have the ability to order custom and that is an option to you, you really have a chance to make this pad true to your own. For sure. There's a lot of different features and things like that, which I'd be happy to walk you through at any time. But there's just too many to list right now. That can make this pad, we can make it a little bit softer in terms of having a little bit more flex. We can add some straps on if we need to, if you're still looking for that more connected feel. We can change the boot around to really give you that forward flex that you need, or something a little bit stiffer depending on your desired play style. I mean, I can go on and on.
Why don't we talk a little bit about that? I mean, we've talked about the control strap. We've talked about the StabiliSlide. We know this thing slides like a hot damn, like all Bauer pads do now. Rebounds come off super hot. Guys love that. Again, I would say industry standard. They set a new standard in terms of just how active those rebounds come off, and they've maintained that. Fit, flex, profile, who it's for, how it's going to fit on your leg. As you said, you can order this. There's some custom options you can do to soften it up to an extent. Change the boot so it's a little flatter, more like the Vapor 2X boot as opposed to steeper on the ultrasonic boot. But stock, this is a steeper boot. This is a stiffer pad for the most part. And has that affected? Are you seeing guys like we felt like for some? Personally, I was in a 2S Pro large, no problem. Little bit on the big side, but no problem. This in large was too big for me. I would definitely go to a medium. Are you seeing? Is that a conversation you're having with goalies as they're trying to make sure they pick the right size pad for them? This is, like I said, a stiffer, more upright pad. Do you need to consider maybe backing down on the size, especially if you were already feeling like what you had was a little big to start with?
Yeah, and there are definitely a lot of different factors that come into play, but especially, say, for example, one of our guys, he came from a 2X pad and now moved into the ultrasonic pad. We did find that he had to size himself down, to be able to get the fit he was looking for. I think he went from like an XL Vapor into a large ultrasonic in particular.
Clearly, you only hire tall people here.
One of which is tall, and the rest of us are about that average 6 foot height.
Okay, so we've gone over the flex, we've gone over the fit, we've gone over any other features on this pad that we need to call out in terms of options. Obviously, if people want to get into custom options, think about ordering it with that 2X boot. As we had it on the website, there are just so many different options. We had it at ingoalmag.com in our review, all the different things you could do in terms of the profile and flex custom on this boot. They want to talk to you about those options and how they'll affect the fit and how it plays. Where can they get a hold of you at?
So even before I do that, one quick note, and let's not forget about, because it's quite important for custom, DigiPrint. Especially when we get into the term custom, especially when it comes to Bauer, that ability to come up with your own custom graphic, this is huge. But you know what? The best time to talk about that with me would be over the phone, and you can reach me at 604-589-8299.
At this point, I hate to say it, I almost assume like that, and it's probably bad on my part. I didn't even talk about DigiPrint because it's just like that's a part of the staple of what you come to expect. If you're going custom, you have the ability, as one of your staff members did, and we'll show that off on Instagram soon enough for his sweet White Rock Whalers Junior B color setup. Yeah, you can pretty much do anything you want on these things, can't you?
You can, and I'm going to stop myself.
Now, hold on. Do you design that? Because you offered to help design, a set of CCM access pads for people, but you kind of strike me as like a paint by numbers crayon type. Like, I'm not picturing you on the graphic design side of custom graphics.
There is not a magic paintbrush in this world that could get me to do some of the coolest things that I've seen from other people have come up with. So I'll help you facilitate your design, but I ain't drawing it for you.
Okay, that's probably a good thing. And the thing is, Bauer has people that do that as well.
That's correct.
In terms of they have a whole team for that. So, yeah, can't believe I forgot DigiPrint. DigiPrint, sliding, StabiliSlide knee. Like, there's just so much about this pad. I kind of understand as we go over the highlights why it's been such a good seller for you. Two things to go over before we go. One, this means that 2S Pro is on sale. I don't know you have that much left, but there are sale prices there. How much of a discount are we looking at for what you've got left in stock?
You're going to ask me the exact number off the top of my head, and you got me. But I think we're close to 20% off, even a little bit more than that. I know we've got a couple pairs left. I literally think I'm down to my last two. But yes, that's a potential option right there.
Did you guys sell that Canuck set?
Oh, we sure did. We sure did. We had a fan. I think they were out in back out east somewhere. That ended up picking it up. Actually,
that was sweet. That was like old vintage Canucks, like the spaghetti downhill skate. Those were gorgeous. We'll have to find that on our Instagram and go from there. The other one is gloves. We didn't talk about it. We're going to break up our segments because you and I talked too long already. But we're going to start talking about, we'll go back to the axis. We'll talk about the gloves and the blocker and gloves for the ultrasonic. We'll get into those in depth in a future episode. But suffice it to say, the way the pucks come off that blocker is just like the pad, super hot, and goalies love it. And that glove, the closure on it, easily the best we've had from Bauer. They just keep getting better, and no wonder it's such a hot seller for you. Cam, Hockey Shop, source of sports in Surrey, hockeyshop.com. Make sure you check them out. Reach out to Cam if you got any questions. Thanks again. Good to have you back on the InGoal Radio Podcast. Looking forward to a lot more of these in the future.
Thanks, Kevin. It's good to be here.
It's nice. I said it last week. It's nice to have you guys back together. Just a little footnote. Just jump off of the Bauer ultrasonic pad and just final thoughts there, Woody.
It's been one of the more popular. It's been one of the more popular pads at retail. What I love about what Bauer has done since introducing the original sort of Odin and the concept of the Cortex skin and basically changing how, for them, pads were built, is they haven't rested on their laurels. With each generation, they've added something new, and not just little tweaks. Like that Stabila slide knee is a major change, and it's one that a lot of goalies are embracing. And we're seeing not everybody at the NHL level that tried it adopted it right away. Ben Bishop talked about, actually, I asked him the question heading into this return to play about, seeing him in it in the training camp with the Dallas Stars. And he said he had one set of each and he was trying it. But a lot of guys have switched right over. Henrik Lundqvist switches right over to the Stabila slide knee. Andrei Vasilevsky's in the Stanley Cup final, switched right over to the Stabila slide knee. And when you watch him moving around on his knees and sliding back and forth and making little pushes and adjustments, man, that seal and the power combined with that seal and the ability to move is fun to watch. The top goalie, the first goalie that's going to be off the board in the NHL draft a week from now, Yaroslav Askarov, has switched over to it. And like, it's almost unfair to me. Like, oh my God, the kid moves so incredibly. And now he's got this pad that slides so well. So the Stabila slide knee has been a big
What's the
thing.
biggest change that
somebody
will notice going to the stabilized knee?
Just that there's no give to it, right? So like, just as soon as that pad hits the ice, it's flat and it's flush and it's sealed. The other difference to me though on this pad, and Cam talked about it a little bit, is it is a fairly stiff, straight pad. Like, it's got some pre-curve into it, but you're not going to put a lot more in yourself. I'm fascinated to see what the next generation is for them. Like, if Stabila Slide makes its way onto the next version, it won't be called 3X. They had 1X, 2X. I believe there's going to be a new name on the next one. And if you can combine it with a more flexible pad, because one of the things we did talk about, we found it fit a little taller. So I think goalies need to be cognizant of that with the ultrasonic pad, as it does, because of the shape and the firmness of it, even though you can dial in, and Cam on Custom Orders has been recommending some of those features that you can make quote unquote softer to go that way. It is a pad that fits in our eyes a little bit higher, and to the point where you might need to go a size down from an extra large to a large, maybe a large to a medium for some goalies. And we've gotten that feedback. But to me, there's a lot of great features already on the pad. The Stabila Slide knee, the way they incorporated it with the new sort of calf wrap and angled and creating that gap between the face and where the calf wrap seals to help make sure there was not too much added friction there. Like, because obviously Stabila Slide, as soon as you improve seal, you put more of the pad on the ice, better contact with the ice, you would think that negatively affects sliding. But the way they sort of angled that calf to take part of the calf wrap off the ice to counter that was just, it makes all the sense in the world looking at it now, but it was really well thought out and well executed. And like I said, there's a reason it's a really popular pad at retail right now, is because they've done a really nice job with it. And we didn't even get into the gloves. We'll save that for another segment, but they've made improvements there as well, especially on the catching glove.
Guys, there's so much to try and describe there about the technology that's gone into these. And Woody put together an incredible review, which is available over at ingoalmag.com. Just a reminder to everybody, InGoal is a subscription site, but all the gear reviews are open for everybody to see. So you can head to the homepage. One of the menu items is equipment reviews, and you can find Woody's review, tons of pictures up there, so you can get a real feel for it. And if you are one of our members, we also had a webinar where Woody sat down with the ultrasonic and invited folks in to come and have a look and ask all the questions they want. And that's posted still for members. So lots of opportunities to follow up over at InGoal with more on the ultrasonic pad.
Do do you guys teach us how to say stabilislide?
5 times fast.
I mean, that's a tough one to spit out at times, but it's really solid, and it's a unique tweak on this pad and the way that it's made up. And I was really curious to see how it was going to be embraced, and under Vasilevsky is a great advertisement in the Stanley Cup final.
Well, I was going to say, my understanding is they actually just brought him one to see, like, check it out, no pressure to wear. What do you think? And he's like, I'm in. Like, next day kind of thing. I love it. I'm in. This is what I want.
So Andrei Vasilevsky is a top contender every year for the Vezina Trophy, but the 2019-2020 recipient is a player that was a nominee 2 years ago and rediscovered his game this year and was the Winnipeg Jets' best player, and Connor Hellebuyck. And he was presented with the award at the virtual NHL awards ceremony, and what a moment that was. Great job by the NHL to get the Oilers alumni, because of the bubble being held in Edmonton, to present all of these awards. And you have a Hockey Hall of Famer in Grant Fuhr making the announcement and then interviewing Connor Hellebuyck. And after that conversation took place, our own Kevin Woodley from InGoal magazine had an opportunity to catch up with Connor Hellebuyck about his Vezina Trophy win and his journey in the life of goaltending. Here is the feature interview presented by the Hockey Shop, source for sports Surrey, on InGoal Radio, the podcast.
I guess the most important thing is congratulations. What's that moment like when you get that phone call, I guess from Grant Fuhr of all people, and find out that you've won the award? Or do you have a heads up going into it?
Thank you. No, it was just a phenomenal feeling and a great experience in how they did it. It was awesome talking with Grant, and it's one of those moments that it's just going to add another milestone, and I'm going to cherish the memory.
Now, were you a Grant Fuhr? Who was your guy growing up? I'm guessing it wasn't Grant, being from Michigan, and I think you used to go to Red Wings games, no?
Yeah, I was definitely a Red Wings fan, but for some reason, my guy was Olaf Kolzig. Loved watching him. Thought he was amazing in the playoffs when they played the Wings, and I had the Wings championship run on a tape, and I loved how they broke his game down. And growing up watching that all the time, it just made me really like him.
So was that so walk me through, and the audience is pure goaltenders here. So young Connor Hellebuyck watching Olaf Kolzig and admiring the style. Like, what is that the guy you're out, whether it's on the ice or playing road hockey? Like, is that the guy you're trying to be? At what point does it go from just something you loved to maybe trying to imitate a guy or try and look for things in certain guys' style and put them in your game? When did that transition occur for you?
Oh, that was late. I never tried to play like them. I just went out and played and had a blast doing it. It wasn't until I was late in high school is when I got a pair of Reebok pads, and it kind of formed my style. And I put a lot of work in that summer between my junior and senior year to get better, because I realized I needed the path and I needed to be better for that path. And that's when I really started to get technical with my game. But all up until that, I was just focusing on making saves.
Did you play other positions? Like, when did you start playing goal, as a youngster? And what drew you to it?
I started playing when I was about 5, and I was playing roller hockey, and that's what drew me to it. We'd skate out, but I had this knack of making saves, and it was really fun, and I enjoyed jumping around in the crease. So I never really stopped playing forward until I was about 13 or 14. And every spring season I would skate out and have fun, and then I started to realize that I couldn't do both, and that's when I became just a strict goalie. And I had so much fun doing both, but goalie was definitely what I had a knack for.
That's funny, because I wasn't intending on going down this path, Connor, but like you're definitely not the first guy that we've talked to, in an era where a lot of young goalies are being, to be honest, at times forced to choose the position or choose their position as young as 8 years old. We talk to guys like yourself. Braden Holtby tells the same story of how being a forward later and continuing to play all positions helped them learn to read the game. Do you see anything looking back all these years later that there was a benefit to not being just a goalie at that age?
Oh, absolutely. Learning both sides of it is very important. You could break down goaltending as much as you want, but until you realize what the forward is going to do, it doesn't really matter, because it's all about kind of predicting what they're going to do and being one step ahead of them.
Now, you talked about high school and sort of coming to the position, or at least coming to that level of concentration late. I loved last night when you were watching you accept the awards on TV, watching Hockey Night here. The list of people that you thanked, and obviously they're people that we've had the pleasure at InGoal to be on the ice with you up in Kelowna. People like Wade Flaherty and Adam Francilia and Ray Petkow and Joe Clark in particular. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about all of them, but I wanted to start with Joe, and I wanted to start with that journey, because you go from getting into the position late in terms of really focusing on it to Odessa. Can you walk me through, or I've heard this story before, so walk our listeners through that path and how you end up in Odessa at this tryout, and then from there meeting Joe, and you know, I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, so after high school, or actually in between high school, there was a league called NAHL, which is essentially all the high school kids that want to continue playing in the summer get together and make an all-star little league. So I played that, had some fun doing that, got picked to go some AAA showcases, and thought I was going to get drafted somewhere. Didn't end up getting drafted anywhere, which was a sad day, but a motivating day. And shortly after the NHL draft, the owner called me, Rick, and he was telling me, come to main camp. We like you, come to main camp. So I've really turned my focus on it. I'm going to make this work. So I ended up making it work. And that's where I met Joe. And Joe in Odessa was just huge for my development, my mind game, my mental game. And he really taught me how to not only, because at that point I was just trying to be the best and I wanted to be perfect every single day. But he taught me that there is two sides of it, where yes, strive to be perfect, but also be realistic with yourself. And I'm still learning this to this day, and I'm still giving Joe calls all the time because he helps me level out my game. But that is where I think my mental game was developed.
When you made that decision, when you got that invite, what did you do that summer? Like, did you change anything in terms of your approach before you met Joe? Was it just sort of a determination thing, Connor, where like, I'm just going to do this? Or was there a plan that you sort of set in motion to make that adjustment? And what kind of work are we talking here? And did you actually drive to Odessa from Michigan for that tryout?
The tryout was in Minnesota, and yes, I did that drive. That was about 12 hours. But after that decision, or after that draft, I made a decision on myself that I'm going to make this work no matter what. So what I did is I went to Sticks and Pucks and got a buddy or two of mine to come with me every other day. And we go and we hit the ice, and I would just work on technical stuff. And this is where being a student of the game for all those years really helped, because I was able to go into these Sticks and Pucks. There's no coaches or anything, and I was able to just do my own drills and figure out what I wanted to be good at. And we just did that over and over again for the month. And then when I got to the camp, that's when things really got going for me, and I was able to just play.
What does that look like? I mean, stick and puck. In an era, Connor, where like there's, these kids have goalie coaches and they're on the ice for hours a week. Your path started with stick and puck and a buddy. What are you doing your own drills out there? Did you ever have any problems in terms of being allowed to be out there in gear? What was that whole process like?
Sticks and Pucks was it was with gear. It's just essentially an open sheet for anyone to come out and play hockey. So right after school, I would go, or in the summer when there was no school, I would go every other day, and I would drag my buddy out with me, and I would just steal one end of the ice. And I know they probably hated it, but I would go out there for an hour and just work. And the days that I couldn't get a net, or I couldn't steal one, or I got yelled at, I would just go to the middle and work on, or when I couldn't get my buddy to come out with me, and I would just work on movement drills and kind of simulate the drills and what I wanted to do in the middle for 45 minutes or until I was tired. And I was just making sure I was on the ice and I was getting better at something.
What a great philosophy. It's funny because, we see all the drills, and, even at InGoal, we tend to publish drills that are, we fall in love with the drills that are more complex, but it really is all about movement, isn't it? At its base foundation, the position.
Yeah, I think that helps you get ahead of the game. And you could break that down so far, but at the end of the day, if your mind's ahead of the game and your feet can do what they need to do, you will get in the right position.
It in some ways, it's kind of simple, eh? So what was the conversation like with Joe yesterday? Did you have a chance to catch up with him after it was announced? How emotional is that to have a guy who's your support through all of this, a guy you've talked to and leaned on over the years, and you get a moment like that? What did it mean to you to be able to share it with him?
No, I haven't had that phone call just yet because my phone's been blowing up the last couple of days, but I'm sure.
We apologize for being a part of that too. Sorry.
Yeah, there's no worries there. We will have that phone call soon, and I have gotten messages from him, and I'm sure he's just as pumped as I am.
Okay, so from there you go to university. How did that, that next step of development, 2 years in the NCAA, your second year, you're a Mike Richter Award winner. We've gone from stick and puck and driving to Minnesota on a tryout to the best goalie in the NCAA in just a few years. What in your mind, looking back, was the biggest steps you took on the ice, or as you said, between the years mentally, and that allowed you to sort of ride up a pretty progressive path?
Yeah, well, I had a really good goalie coach at UMass Lowell and Cam Ellsworth, and we butted heads a lot, which is good. We're both stubborn, and we both are making each other better. And I also didn't play my whole first month, or I got one game that I got pulled in my first month of college. And when I was in that game, I remember talking to Joe, and I said, it's not as hard as I just made that. Like, I'm going to be good. And it took me a whole month to get another start. And I had to scratch and claw in practice and put the same effort I did in the summers previous to, and some, to really kind of get noticed again and make them realize that you can't write me off and that I'm here to stay and I'm going to push for playing time. And I just had a huge drive there to be better every single day, and kind of the same philosophy. I wasn't going to let myself fail.
What kind of things, when you talk about butting heads, but I'm curious because your path in terms of your development, your game has evolved over the years. It's hard for young goaltenders sometimes, Connor. They go to a new place, they go with a new coach, especially guys that bounce around a lot. You can get a lot of different voices, and it can be hard sometimes when you're trying to make that goalie coach happy, but you have some certain beliefs. How did you find that balance between, hey, this is being willing to try new things, but at the same time having to stand up for what you thought was your foundation? That's because I think that's something that a lot of young goalies probably that are going through similar situations in junior and even in minor hockey as they get older probably have that question themselves. What would your advice be?
Oh, it's tough to put advice there. I would always test it out and just try it, and if it was comfortable, it would stay. But there's a lot of times where I wouldn't believe it and then I would give it a courtesy try, and if I didn't like it, I didn't bring it into my game. I guess it was just being stubborn, and there's a lot of good things that did get brought into my game, but there were certain things that I just was set in stone on and didn't let anyone talk me out of.
So you second year Mike Richter Award winner, as I said, top goalie in the NCAA, and then another decision, just like the decision to go to college, to pick a school, the decision to turn pro. We've talked a little bit about Joe and the role he's played. Was he a voice that you leaned on through all those decisions at each level, a guy that you could count on for, making sure you had the right advice as you made decisions like that? Because that's a big one.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I almost did stay for a third year at school. Like, I was almost set on staying, but then I got to thinking about it, and I had a couple good conversations with guys like Joe and everyone around me, and I could just feel it was in my gut that I needed to go, and it was time for me to move on and get better at a new level and start the pro career. And I'm very glad that I did. Things turned out really well, but there was a time there where I thought I might stay.
I think everybody. I think the Jets are happy you did. What? Now you're with a new team again, another new voice, a couple new voices. Wade Flaherty, who I wanted to talk about, a guy who, just an exceptional goalie coach, and there would have been changes with him. You would have had Dusty Emu when you first got there in terms of in the American Hockey League when you first started as a pro. Again, another step. Did you approach it like you had to do more as you took each step up the levels, or was more about just sticking with your foundation?
No, there's definitely adjustments at every level.
What's the hardest one?
The hardest one is going to the NHL. There's
Okay.
a lot demanded on your hands, and you almost lose a little bit of form in the NHL. I mean, it's always there, and you always have it, but you almost need to forget about it a little bit and just go back to making saves because these players are so good, and they test your hands and they test everything about your game. So. And they can do everything. So there's no set in stone drill that you can do that replicates the NHL. It's a read and react type of play every single night and every single shot. And yeah, I would say that was definitely the hardest jump and along the way. And Dusty Emu was in the AHL program and he helped me out a lot with my post play. And so every step of the way I got a little better at something else.
You mentioned the hands. Was hand position? Because I remember, we've seen it change and evolve with you over the years. Was that something where when you first started, I remember it, am I right in saying it was a little lower back then and has it come up over the years? Is that a process you went through with Wade as well?
Yeah, well, it actually started up in juniors and I got to college and crept its way down, and then over the AHL crept its way even more down, and I wasn't even realizing it. And I could get away with it. That's right the problem. I could make a lot of glove saves being down and not realizing how much I needed to be up. And when I got to the NHL, I was getting tested so much on my hands, I realized that I need to go back to my foundation, which was pretty much from juniors.
Yeah, it's funny. They don't take long to pick up on things like a low hand position in the National League, do they?
No, they don't. And over the years of not really being strict on that, because I was working on other things, it kind of just crept lower and lower and lower until it was in a bad spot.
I remember watching, and when you were with Winnipeg, it looked like you were learning for another post play. You talked about post play, reverse VH, and adding that to your game with Wade. And I remember thinking, geez, this must be really hard to me to add something like that, as much as it's become a staple for a lot of guys in the years since. But to add something like that, to make a change like that, while playing in the National Hockey League. Do people underestimate how tough it is to make changes in a season to your game, so especially something as significant as that?
Yeah, it definitely is tough, but it all comes down to repetition over and over and over again. And then you get the good part of playing games and testing it out. And hopefully you figure it out quick. And I think that's the most important part of being an NHL goalie and elite is figuring things out quickly.
The from there, after a couple of years, then we get into, and I wanted to, before we let you go, just touch base on the switch. You made a change to Ray. You come to Kelowna for the first time and meet Adam Francilia. We've written about it. We've talked to you about it in the past in little chunks here and there. Obviously, had the pleasure at InGoal of being up there. But how big an adjustment was that for you that first summer? And how important a step was that for you to take? Because it just seems like every step along the way, you're always putting the work in. And that was a ton of work for you. How important was that looking back?
I mean, everything that you add to your game is important. Not only that, sometimes you test things that don't work out. So that's important too, so you don't fall into that trap. It's really just developing what you want to do and how you want to do it and what's going to give you the most success. And there's a lot of guys that will overdo a lot of stuff, and that is what they need to learn too, because overdoing something could work poorly as well.
Is it something like, it's funny because I know you're a golfer and a really good golfer too, but can it be like sometimes you find something that you think works, and then you, like you said, tend to maybe just look at it and do it more and more, and to the point where you can end up at an extreme?
Yeah, and just like post play, a lot of guys will overuse the post play and stay in it all the time, and hinders your movement and able to get out on shots. And yeah, everyone says, well, yeah, I have a good push off that, but it's way more efficient staying on your feet. And I think patience and staying on your feet is almost getting overlooked these days.
Would you say that's a staple? I guess it's funny because I do hear that a lot, Connor, from a lot of guys, and it seems to be coming back. Hey, we see it with Hudobin in the playoffs right now. Like he's, even on post play, he's not down early. He holds edges. Is that where the game has come in terms of being able to stay patient? And I guess the question then becomes, how do you build that patience? There's probably a lot of young goalies out there that hear you talk about patience and staying patient. How do you reinforce it?
You practice over and over again, and yeah, that's one of those repetition things. And once you get comfortable with it, and you sometimes are going to get beat, and it's not going to be comfortable, and it's not going to be happy about it, but it helps you read the game differently.
What's this been like since the NHL paused? Obviously, you had a long gap, and then the playoffs, and then now. How have you managed to sort of stay on top of things in terms of your game and in terms of physically not able to go to Kelowna, but you and A-Fran have a program where you guys are still working, just using video and stuff like that. What's this been like for a goalie to be away from the game as much as you've been?
It's hard to answer that. I think everything you do around the game helps and really shapes who you are on and off the ice.
Video work? Is there something that keeps you connected? Because we're looking at another big gap here. Is there something you think that can keep you connected, or do you need to, as much as interviews like this don't allow you to, and I apologize, but do you need to step away from it? Is that important for young goalies too, to know when you need to take a break, that it can't be 24/7, 365?
Yeah. Your mind needs to your mind needs a break and to relax, because mental energy is huge, especially in goaltending when you need to stay ahead of the game. We definitely watch video, but there is a time where you need to just forget about a game or forget about stuff.
All right. Hey, last one, I promise. How excited are you? As much as the return to play and there was negotiation and all that, the one thing that kind of came out of it was the Olympics. You've represented the United States at the World Championships. You were at the World Cup, although on Team North America, which must have been a hell of an experience. But how excited are you at an opportunity to represent the USA on the big stage?
Yeah, if I got that call, I would be honored to wear the flag and represent the flag. And it's hard to talk about the experience that I haven't had yet. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to hopefully getting a chance at that.
Hey, listen, so Connor, I really appreciate the time. I know you've been inundated with media requests and calls and text messages. So I just wanted to make sure I said thanks on behalf of our listeners. I know they're going to really enjoy this conversation, and some really good takeaways there for young goalies in terms of the need to just do the work and grind through to go from stick and puck to the Vezina Trophy, man. It's a hell of a run, and a credit to you and all the work you do. And all the people you surround yourself with. So thank you very much for taking the time with us today.
You're welcome. Take care.
So a whole lot there. One, playing forward or defense, or playing out until 13 years old. His hand position over the years and how he rectified that getting in the National Hockey League. But there's a lot of jumping off points from that conversation with Connor Hellebuyck, Woody.
Yeah, the hand one I thought was interesting because I remember, a lot of people used to ask. I mean, they were darn near his ankles at times. He held that glove so low for so long, and I know, Wade tried to get him to bring it up, and we didn't really get into it. But the story I'd been told is that when he was in college, they would literally do like 1,000 chicken wing saves a day where you're kind of using your elbows. And there's nothing wrong with that, sort of leaning in and using your elbow rather than using your hand. And they just drilled it to the point where it just became his first instinct, his natural reaction. And so the hands got a little lower. He was relying on that save. And as you know, there are things you can get away with in the national, or maybe at NCAA level, that you can't in the National Hockey League. And it didn't take long for teams to sort of look at where that hand was positioned and try and rip him top cheese. And I don't even know that was necessarily a more vulnerable area, but when you show a potential vulnerable area and teams target it on a regular basis, goals are going in there. I mean, if everybody's shooting high glove all the time, and we see this, actually, I see this a lot, like as an aside, when I do the playoff scouting projects where I look at all the goals and it's like, all these goals went up high glove because teams shot there more often. Most guys, their goal chart looks higher, high glove, but the save percentage is actually quite often a lot lower, low glove. But teams so there was an element of that, right? Teams saw the hands were low, they shot high glove a lot, and you ended up with more high glove goals. That's just the way it's going to go. So, but eventually over time, he got the hands back up, as he said, to where they used to be. And now I don't think anybody has any questions about his hands or his glove position or anything like that. As a matter of fact, I don't think there are many questions about anything. And as you heard in the interview, it's because he puts the work in. Like that to me was the underlying theme. This guy's not afraid to work, whether it's at the NHL level making changes or coming out of high school with no sort of prospects of where he's going to play next and going to stick and puck. Like 9 years ago, this guy was going to stick and puck.
Wild. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to go,
Who did that remind you of from one of our good interviews?
Eric Comrie. Yeah.
Yeah. Another guy in the organization.
Yeah. And that's
I
guys that
watched
want
stick and puck at my desk, the rink's down below, and I watch stick and puck, and I often think, should I go out there and just like work on a couple of things? Or
I want video.
Like, would it be goofy? And then you hear this. I mean, totally different things, but like guys have done it, and it's been an important part of their games and their development. What did you take away from that discussion, Hutch?
Well, it's just you keep talking about the stick and puck. I walked into a rink a couple summers ago, and they had one of these little tiny ponds that they create for the sort of 3 and 4 year olds to learn how to skate. And there was a kid who was about 6'1", a midget goaltender, wearing nothing but his lower body gear, doing crease movement drills. And I had to go in there and just introduce myself and tell him how impressed I was to see that he was taking advantage of the opportunity. So great, this is rubbing off on lots of people. For me was when Woody asked him about what the toughest transition was. And I sort of expected, I think most guys seem to tell us not that it's the one to the NHL. They seem to tell us it's going to American League or the first step to pro. And he was just so quick to say the National Hockey League.
I agree.
And then when I just love the line that there's no drill you can do that can prepare you for the National Hockey League or something along those lines. And I thought that was great. And how nice too to just sort of casually be able to say that, well, you get in some games and sort of get used to things. I mean, most people aspire to that level. For that to be something that he can just do, almost like a young kid hopping out on the peewee ice to get used to some reads and things. So, that part really stood out for me. But I thought the whole interview was fantastic and great to see a little bit more inside.
And speaking of which, there was a hint during the course of the interview about why he wears the number 37, but wasn't formally answered. So we wanted to reach back into the vault and let you know from Connor Hellebuyck himself why he wears the number 37.
When I was growing up, I don't know how or why, I found Olaf Kolzig, and it was a big role model, hockey model for me. And I think it's because the 98 playoffs and the Wings played him. He was considered Godzilla, and he played unbelievable in that entire series, actually in the entire playoffs going up to that point. And I just think I idolized him and loved his nickname. And then I started collecting his cards, and I collected his jersey cards. And to this day, I got about, I'd say 10 to 15 jersey cards and a pad card of him. And still, I'd like to meet him, and hopefully one day I will.
So that's cool. Like how an interview a couple of years ago, that soundbite that you just heard from spending the time with him in the summer at Net 360 just piggybacks onto being a Vezina Trophy winner. And if he would have known then, now, like I wonder if he ever projected himself at the top of the National Hockey League landscape. I mean, 2-time Vezina Trophy finalist and a Vezina Trophy winner. It's amazing. And he wears the number 37 because of that fandom of Godzilla and that great moment and that great run by Ole the goalie, Olaf Kolzig, back in the late 90s. But he had to actually get permission to wear the number 37 when he made the National Hockey League with the Winnipeg Jets, because the Jets came from Atlanta, and the Atlanta Thrashers had retired the number 37. Nobody was going to wear number 37 again because of the tragic death of Dan Snyder. So Connor Hellebuyck and the Winnipeg Jets reached out to the Snyder family and got permission for him to wear number 37. And now that number with the Winnipeg Jets and the heels of the Snyder family, it belongs to a Vezina Trophy champion and winner. So just a little bit of a journey for both the goaltender himself and that number. And we all know how comfortable players are and how they love their numbers. The number 37 is now on the back of the Winnipeg Jets goaltender and a Vezina Trophy winner. So a little bit of history there, Woody.
Yeah, no, hey, and listen, I'm going to put Hutch on the spot here because that was such a good answer from Connor Hellebuyck from our session up at Net 360 on the number 37. And I think we know why it was a good answer, because the guy asking the questions was not me. It was your son, Matthew, and it was our questions it was our questions with kids segments. And so now I'm going to ask you, put you on the spot. I need you to queue up the answer about what it's like to be in the stadium, because we're going to give this a little bonus content here, because that was one of the best answers I've ever heard Connor Hellebuyck give, and just what that sensation is like to play in front of 20,000 screaming fans in a whiteout in Winnipeg.
Well, you know what? You get used to it, and you almost don't even realize it's there until that one moment where everyone just starts getting super loud, and you like feel the arena rumble. And the only way that I can describe it to you is you'll get shivers and goosebumps running through you and down your spine. It's the coolest feeling in the world.
That was
one of the best answers. Yeah.
It was one of the best answers we've had from anybody about anything, I thought.
Yeah. So I wanted to slip that in.
And now we sit there and we go, he just came off an experience playing in front of nobody.
Yes.
like the yin and yang of this is incredible over the last couple of years. And yeah, the energy that you feed off of a crowd, and then playing in front of an empty stadium. Boy, we've been all over the place over the last year and a half, haven't we? As a society and as a goaltending world, and just the sports world in general.
It's crazy. It is, and actually, if I'd been a better journalist, I would have had that clip queued up to play to him and ask him what it was like playing in front of no one.
Ends up being a pretty good contract, though, for the Winnipeg Jets. $6 million, a 6-year deal. So he's approaching the halfway point of that contract. But you reward him at the time, and pretty incredible. You're doing the math for me on the contract right now, aren't you, Woody?
No, I'll be honest with you, Darren. I think they gave him a bridge deal, or was that what? Did he sign that right out of the finalist year?
Yes.
Okay.
2018.
Okay, so a couple of years into it. It's really interesting because that was a contract where there's an organization that had waited a long time to sort of find the guy, and they believed in him as the guy, and they didn't want to take a risk of losing that, and so they locked him in long term. And this ties back to the conversation we started this whole podcast with about unrestricted free agency. When as much as everybody wants GMs to be careful, and it's a buyer's market, and you don't want to overpay, you want to be careful on term. When you find the guy, when you know he fits into your room, when you know he fits into your system, when you believe that he's the guy that can lead you to great things, you don't want to lose him. And so, we talked about that game of chicken that some of these GMs are playing right now with, like, for example, Jacob Markstrom here in Vancouver. And you wonder, is the risk worth it when the chances you're taking is you could lose that guy?
I was just going to say, Darren, you said it looks like a great contract for Winnipeg, and it absolutely is. But I think that's a great example of a win-win contract, isn't it? I mean, if he went to market today, what's the number going to be? I think that was sort of what we were talking about as being the high watermark right now. And so it's fantastic when you see that both sides get something out of a great deal.
Good scouting, good drafting, homegrown talent will always allow you to beat the system a little bit financially, because you can grow with that instead of going out in the open market and paying for it. This year may be the exception, but it certainly worked out with Craig Heisinger and Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Winnipeg Jets. Thanks to Cam and Connor for the conversations on this week's episode of InGoal Radio, the podcast. And now we look forward to the conclusion of the Stanley Cup Final and the start of free agency, and if and when Anton Khudobin will go by the way of the Dobie Bird. Thanks for listening.